I had been with Rose for 6 years. I originally thought we would get married, have children, and live happily ever after. But on my birthday, Rose's first love returned to the country. That's when I found out I was just a substitute for her. She had never truly loved me. Since that was the case, I chose to let go and give her the happiness she deserved. On the phone, I said to my sister, "Sis, I've agreed to the wedding plans." She replied, "That's great, Robert. I'm so glad you've come to your senses." Chapter 1. I could hear the excitement in her voice. Then she added, "Don't worry, the person I'll introduce to you will definitely be someone you like. By the way, I haven't seen Rose in years. Be sure to invite her too. I need to thank her for taking care of you all these years." I nodded. "Sure, but I don't think she'll be able to make it." I sat on the couch, my voice flat, my eyes fixed on the TV in front of me. On the screen, Lou Group's CEO Rose and the newly returned movie star Ethan were sweetly embracing each other. The media reporters were all over the story, congratulating them. My sister asked, "Not free? Could it be because her first love is back?" Oh right, how could I forget? Today was the day movie star Ethan returned to the country after all these years. They must finally be getting together. My heart tightened as I realized even my sister knew about Rose's first love, while I had been a fool playing the role of her substitute for 6 years. All these years, Rose had kept her reputation clean, with no rumors or scandals. No scandals. That's true. During the years I was with her, I never caused any trouble. During the day, I was a proper student, and at night, I was a proper sugar baby to her. I thought she loved me, but just a few days ago, I found out the reason she had kept me around was that I resembled Ethan, her unforgettable first love. She had always just seen me as a stand-in for him. I asked my sister, "Did you know Rose had a first love?" She replied, "Of course I did." When her first love Ethan went abroad for his dreams, Rose was heartbroken for a long time and almost got depressed. Thankfully, she eventually got over it. Rose was my sister Helen's college roommate, and they had always been close. So when I came to study here, Helen asked Rose to look after me. Over time, I developed feelings for Rose, and naturally, we began living together. After college graduation, I couldn't bear to leave Rose, so I gave up my family's plan for me to return home and take over the business. Instead, I found a photography job here to stay. I had wanted to tell my sister about me and Rose for a long time, but Rose always stopped me. She never wanted to make our relationship public to her friends and family. At the time, Rose told me the timing wasn't right, and being naive, I thought we had a long future ahead of us and that we'd have a chance to share the good news later. Looking back now, there was no need to bring it up at all. My sister said, "By the way, Robert, Rose and Ethan have a great relationship. If you see them, can you ask Ethan for an autograph for me? I'll send you some extra spending money." I felt bitter inside. Even my sister admired Ethan, the famous movie star. Here I was, just an unknown photographer, feeling completely insignificant. She asked, "When are you coming back?" I replied, "Sis, I'll probably be back in about 2 weeks." Before I could finish, the door opened. At that moment, Rose walked in. She asked, "Where are you going in 2 weeks?" I quickly hung up the phone and looked up at Rose, who had returned. She was alone, with no one else with her. After hugging her first love at the airport today, how come she's back alone now? But since she was back, a small part of my unease subsided. Maybe I should still try to hold on to her. I suddenly felt like I was rushing things by agreeing to marry so soon. Rose's intense gaze fell on my face. She continued, "Are you spacing out? You still haven't answered me. You said you're going somewhere in 2 weeks." I replied, "Someone in my family is getting married." I made up an excuse, glad it didn't raise any suspicions. Rose didn't ask more questions, but instead, her shy eyes were locked on me. My face reddened slightly as something crossed my mind. I said, "Rose, if you don't need anything, I'll head upstairs." Before I could turn around, she hugged me from behind, pressing her warm body against mine. My heart raced as if it was about to burst, but the heat in my chest was quickly doused by a cold splash of water. If I hadn't seen her hugging another man today, and if her body didn't still carry the scent of that man, I might have thought she actually liked me. But she clearly didn't love me. So why was she being so affectionate? Chapter 2. The woman nestled in my arms, and her ethereal voice broke the silence. She asked, "Did you see the news today?" "Yeah, I saw it." I swallowed hard. Could this be her final hug? She asked again, "What do you think about it?" I remained silent. She continued, "There's a welcome back party tonight. I'll take you there. Remember, your sister's a fan of Ethan. You can ask him for an autograph on her behalf. I'm sure he'll agree." "Okay," she said. "I have to go to work, so I won't be staying for dinner." Rose grabbed her car keys and phone, ready to leave. I couldn't help but try to keep her. After all, today was my birthday, and I couldn't believe she had forgotten. I said, "Rose, Why don't you stay for a little while and eat before you go? The food's already ready. She replied, No, I have a meeting with a client. You go ahead and eat. I'll have my assistant pick you up for the party later. I didn't insist. I just silently watched as Rose walked out of the door. In the past, every year on my birthday, she would give me small gifts, a scarf she had knitted herself or figurines of things I liked. Rose knew I loved photography. Whenever she heard about an auction for camera equipment, no matter how much it cost, she would buy it for me. This year, everything had changed. She no longer cared about me. In the end, I threw all the dishes I had carefully prepared into the trash, just like my love for her no longer worth holding on to. Just after throwing the trash away, my phone pinged with a series of birthday greetings. I was surprised that my friends had remembered my birthday. Even my older sisters had sent red envelopes. At that moment, 2 strangers added me as friends. I didn't recognize them, but usually, people who had my number were either friends or acquaintances, so I accepted their requests. The first profile picture was of a lazy cat. As soon as I accepted the request, the person sent me a huge red envelope, accompanied by pictures of flowers and wine, wishing me a happy birthday. I asked, Who are you? The person replied, Hello, my fiancé. Happy birthday. I didn't expect this fiancé, whom I hadn't even met yet, to be so generous. It looked like I'd have to make an even bigger gesture when it was her birthday. The second profile picture seemed a bit familiar. As soon as I accepted the request, the person's moments popped up with a post. The picture showed a plate of shrimp and a pair of hands peeling the shrimp. I recognized those hands. The nails were painted with designs I had done myself. I was stunned. Rose, who always claimed she never did anything with her hands, was peeling shrimp for someone else. This was something I had never experienced in all the years we were together. Back then, I always peeled shrimp for her while she worked on her laptop, quietly waiting for me to feed her. There were times when I pricked my fingers on the shrimp shells and bled. It always hurt, but I just endured it. But now, it seemed Rose was peeling shrimp for someone else. This was the difference between being loved and not being loved. The caption read, Round and round I've returned home, but she's still waiting for me. She knows I love shrimp, so she bought all the shrimp from the restaurant. A sharp pain shot through my chest. My mind raced as I recalled Rose's profile picture frame. No wonder this new contacts frame looked familiar. It was clearly a couple's frame. All these years, I had never been given such treatment because Rose was afraid that anyone would find out about us. I had been the only one kept in the dark all this time, while she had already made it clear to everyone that her heart belonged to someone else. Chapter 3. I had unknowingly fallen asleep on the sofa, and it was Rose's voice that woke me up. It's almost time for the dinner party, she said. Change into this. As my little brother, you can't embarrass me tonight, got it? Rose handed me a box. I hadn't planned on going, but under her gaze, I reluctantly changed into the suit she had prepared for me. She said, Robert, you look really handsome. Your future girlfriend is going to be so. Rose came over and adjusted my clothes, clearly pleased with my appearance. A sense of pride quietly swelled in my chest. Was she trying to distance herself from me, or was she giving me a warning? In any case, it didn't matter. I had already decided to leave. I nervously swallowed, my voice almost failing me, and I reminded her, Sis, it's time to go. She nodded, let's go. She walked ahead of me, and I made sure to keep my distance, no longer engaging in any intimate gestures. We walked in silence, one in front of the other, behind. Rose sat in the driver's seat, and I initially planned to sit in the front passenger seat. However, Rose frowned and said, Robert, you sit in the back today, okay? I didn't ask why and obediently opened the door to the back seat. I knew the front seat was typically reserved for a girlfriend or boyfriend, but now our roles had clearly changed. At that moment, Rose's phone rang. Its ringtone echoed in the back seat. She said, Robert, pass me my phone. It was almost second nature for Rose to toss her phone into the back seat as soon as she got into the car. Her pale arms stretched back to grab it, and I couldn't help but think back to the photo from last night, the image of her peeling shrimp for Ethan. I froze for a moment, lost in the thought. Rose snapped me out of it. Robert, the phone. I came back to my senses and reached for it, handing it to her. As I did, I noticed the name on the caller ID, husband. I hadn't expected Rose to be serious about marrying someone else. But what was I, sugar baby, or just a little brother? What kind of little brother spends the night hugging and sleeping together? Rose didn't explain. Maybe she had just accepted it herself. On my phone, I had messages filled with birthday wishes from friends, but not a single one from Rose. She said, Okay, I'll be right there to pick you up. Her voice was soft, carrying a hint of joy. When she turned back to face me, her smile was a little awkward. She said, Sorry, Robert. Ethan's car broke down, and I need to go pick him up. Okay. My expression didn't change, and I continued quietly scrolling through my phone. She said, Robert, I looked up at Rose. She continued, Robert, I'm not getting any younger. I should start thinking about getting married. I nodded. Okay. I hope you find happiness. Chapter 4. Is this really how you feel? Yeah. The car quickly arrived at the spot where Ethan was waiting by the roadside. Ethan instinctively reached for the back seat, but when he saw I was already sitting there, he stopped. Ethan, you sit in the front, Rose said with a gentle smile. Ethan replied, I get car sick in the front, so I'll sit in the back. All right then. Rose didn't say much more, and after Ethan got in, she started driving again. Once in the car, Ethan greeted me. Hey, kid. I responded, hey. Rose said, Ethan, this is Robert, Helen's little brother. Ethan replied, oh, you're the whiny little brother Helen used to talk about. I can't believe you've grown up so much. His tone carried a hint of teasing. I didn't react much. It was true that I used to cry a lot when I was younger. Rose smiled and came to my defense. Ethan, don't tease him. He's shy. She paused for a moment before adding, Robert, this is Ethan, my fiancé. He'll be your brother-in-law from now on, okay? Sister, this would be the last time I called her sister. After today, perhaps we would never cross paths again. I said, hello, brother-in-law. Rose seemed quite pleased with my attitude. If this had been the past, I would have caused a scene by now. In the past, when she returned home drunk, supported by a male model, I would have made a fuss and we'd have argued for days. Ethan said, Rose, by the way, I was in such a rush earlier that I forgot to bring my violin. Can you go back and grab it for me? And also, can you pick up the makeup artist and my assistant? You know I'm a celebrity, my image is important. Rose said, okay. When Ethan said this, he cast a meaningful glance at me. I understood this man was deliberately provoking me. Makeup artists, assistants, and the violin, if all of them got in the car, there would clearly be no room left. So Rose pulled over to the side of the road, then sent me the address and a 2,000 renminbi red envelope, saying, Robert, why don't you just take a taxi? I've sent you the address. I understood this wasn't a birthday gift, it was just the taxi fare. Normally, her birthday red envelopes would be 520 or 1314, with good meanings behind them. I didn't say anything and silently got out of the car. As I got out, I clearly saw a glimmer of coldness in Ethan's eyes, followed by a victorious smile. Standing by the roadside, I watched as Rose's car slowly drove away, disappearing from my sight. I opened the taxi app and noticed the location was quite remote, with hardly any cars passing by. I walked along, hoping to catch a ride, but even when cars passed, no one was willing to stop. By the time I arrived at the hotel, the banquet had already started. Chapter 5. Rose and Ethan, as the stars of the banquet, were already being fawned over on stage as they gave their speeches. I quietly entered the exhibition hall and found a corner where no one noticed me. I grabbed a quick bite to eat. After a 2-hour walk, my feet were sore and blisters had already formed. Finally, the dance segment began. As the main guest, Ethan naturally invited Rose to dance the first song. Taking advantage of this moment, I went to the restroom. When I saw my disheveled appearance in the mirror, I splashed some cold water on my face. Suddenly, I was grabbed from behind, and a sack was thrown over my head. A few people started beating me. One of them said, "Look at you, thinking you can compete with Ethan for his girlfriend." Exactly. This is what happens when you offend Ethan, the movie king. They kept hitting me until they were tired, then finally stopped. I was in so much pain, and before I could even pull myself out of the sack, I heard the bathroom door click. It was clearly locked from the outside. Despite the noise in the restroom, no one seemed to notice. Clearly, the hotel staff had been bribed. I struggled to tear the sack off my body. Every inch of me ached, and I could hardly stand. When I finally crawled over to the door, I realized it wouldn't open. The lights went out just then. I have claustrophobia. As a child, I was locked in the basement by my friends, and by the time my older sisters came to find me, I had already passed out. Now, I felt lightheaded and trembling. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed Rose's number. The phone rang a few times before it was picked up. On the other end, I heard, "Robert, your sister drank too much and is already asleep." But I clearly heard Rose's voice asking, "Who is it?" Ethan quickly hung up. I knew Rose must have been with Ethan when I called. I tried calling again, but the phone had already been turned off. I was left alone in the bathroom for the rest of the night. Of course, I fainted later on due to fear. The next day, the staff found me and sent me to the hospital. Thankfully, I was treated in time. When I finally woke up, it had been 5 days. I took out my phone, hoping to see if Rose had tried to contact me, but all I found was a simple 2-word message. On business trip. The date was 5 days ago. I absent-mindedly scrolled to Ethan's moments. There were photos of meals, sights, and travel check-ins. It was clear that they had gone on a honeymoon early after being discharged. I went to the hotel to check the surveillance footage, only to be told that the cameras were broken and couldn't be checked. No surveillance meant no evidence to prove that the people who attacked me were Ethan's fans. What a coincidence, the cameras just happened to be broken, and I had no way of checking them. I had no choice but to return home in disappointment. I couldn't help but wonder how Ethan's fans even knew who I was. I had barely ever been in public with Rose. I hadn't expected Ethan to harbor such hostility toward me. I had no evidence, so I decided to return home and pack up my things. I didn't have much, mostly photography equipment. But as soon as I opened the door, I was greeted by the sight of the two of them, cozy and affectionate, kissing in the living room. I hadn't expected to walk in on such a scene. Chapter 6. I didn't know whether to leave or just say, "You two continue." Rose said, "Robert, you're back. Ethan would be staying with us for the next few days," as she explained. As she spoke, the two of them were still tightly pressed together, reluctant to part. Okay. I had no issue with Ethan moving in. After all, he would be the one in charge here sooner or later. Ethan said, "Rose, you're so good to me. Once the heating in my place is set up, I'll head back." Rose replied, "Why go back? What's mine is yours. We're not strangers." Rose gave a soft laugh, then let go of Ethan and walked to the fridge to grab him a drink. It wasn't until just then that I realized Ethan didn't like cold drinks. Rose said, "You must be exhausted from packing earlier. Let me heat up some milk for you, okay?" They exchanged knowing glances, and I, unwilling to stay as a third wheel, decided to head to my room to pack up. As I reached the door to the room on the second floor, I suddenly froze. Scattered all over the floor were my photography equipment and film rolls, some of which were falling out onto the ground. There was also a water stain on the floor, with some of the film soaked in water. A lot of my equipment was piled up as though it had been deliberately broken. Ethan said, "Robert, I'm sorry. When I saw you weren't back yet, I was cleaning up your room and accidentally knocked your stuff over. I don't know how much your equipment costs, but if you want, just name a price and I'll pay you back." Rose, hearing the noise from upstairs, came up and glanced at the scattered equipment. She casually replied, "It's just some photography equipment. Ethan, you didn't do it on purpose. This stuff isn't worth much. We'll just buy some more later." I clenched my fists tightly. These were the photos I had worked on for many years, pouring so much effort into them. Now they were destroyed. Some of it was even due to be sent to the magazine that night. Rose knew these things were precious. She never allowed anyone to clean in my room, yet she let Ethan in here. I was furious. If the room outside was like this, what about inside? I quickly walked into the room and found my laptop lying on the floor, alone and untouched. The floor was soaked with water, as if someone had intentionally flooded the place. Clearly, all the data on the laptop was gone. This laptop contained some of the photos and materials I was planning to publish. Ethan said, "Robert, when I came in, I was shocked too. I rushed to turn off the water and tripped over the computer." As soon as Rose heard this, a look of panic crossed her face. She asked, "You tripped? Are you okay?" "Let me see." Ethan replied, "I'm fine, just a little bruise on my knee. It's nothing." Rose then turned to me, her voice sharp. "Robert, what were you thinking? Why didn't you turn off the tap?" I was speechless. I opened my mouth, but anyone could tell that if I hadn't turned off the tap, the water wouldn't just stay in the room, it would have flooded downstairs by now. And to get to the bathroom, you wouldn't even need to pass by the computer desk. Now Rose was clearly trying to defend Ethan. Rose said, "I'll take you to the hospital." When she looked at Ethan, her voice was gentle, but when she turned to me, her eyes were filled with anger and her tone was cold. "Robert, while you're here, you better clean up your room. I don't want to come back to this mess when Ethan is living here." Chapter 7. After Rose finished speaking, she took Ethan to the hospital. Not long after they left, I started to pack up the film rolls. Fortunately, I managed to salvage some. As for the damaged equipment and computer, I called in a professional to handle it. I was informed that most of it was beyond repair, with many parts no longer available on the market. The undamaged items, I carefully packed myself. I arranged for a courier and, to be safe, paid 10 times the usual amount for insurance, sending the equipment back to my hometown. However, the courier hadn't gone far when the van was stopped, and a fire was set to burn everything inside. When the courier called me trying to explain what happened, I stood frozen in place, half in shock. How could this happen? I knew from start to finish that Ethan was targeting me. I hadn't done anything wrong in these past days, so why was he doing this to me? It had happened before at the hotel, and now it was the courier. What would happen next? Just as I was trying to make sense of it, Rose and Ethan got out of the car. I couldn't hold it in any longer and stormed up to Ethan, grabbing him roughly. I shouted, "Ethan, what the hell is going on? Why are you doing this?" Rose yelled, "Robert, what are you doing? Let go of Ethan right now." A flash of displeasure crossed her face as she grabbed my wrist. Her voice was cold and stern, but my gaze remained fixed on Ethan. I said, "What am I doing? Why don't you ask him what he's been doing?" My eyes were bloodshot. My entire body was on the verge of exploding with anger. Ethan replied, "Rose, I think I accidentally broke his photography equipment. He's still mad about it." "Sorry, little brother. I'll pay you back for your equipment. Just tell me how much it cost, and I'll have my manager transfer the money." Rose said, "Isn't this already settled? Robert, why are you still hanging on to this? I'm ordering you now to let go of him." Rose squeezed my wrist tightly, causing me pain, but eventually, I released her grip. I slumped to the side, feeling utterly helpless, as if my soul had left me. Rose said, "I already told you I'll buy a new set of equipment. You don't need to keep dwelling on this. After all, Ethan didn't mean it. In the end, you didn't even turn off the tap." I didn't respond. Every piece of equipment was something she had given me, and I had cherished them so much, never wanting to let them get damaged. Many of them were rare and no longer available for purchase. But to Ethan, none of it mattered. Did that mean I didn't matter either? At that moment, my heart died completely. That evening, I spent the night on the couch, just trying to get some rest. But I could hear the sounds of Rose and Ethan in the upstairs room, their voices filled with intimacy. I lay downstairs, quietly enduring the torment of it all. Chapter 8. The next morning, I quickly washed up, changed clothes, and was ready to leave. Just then, Rose came downstairs, dressed in a black lace nightgown. When we used to sleep together, she would wear something equally provocative. I couldn't help but notice the hickeys on her pale neck. I quickly looked away, grabbing a coat from the side and heading for the door. Rose asked, "Robert, did you make breakfast?" Like a lazy cat, she lounged on the couch, her alluring nightgown barely covering her thighs, her body exuding a sensual charm. Hadn't she and Ethan enjoyed themselves enough last night? Was she now trying to seduce me? I swallowed hard, forcing myself to look away. "I'm just heading to the studio. I'll be back later," I replied. She said, "Your studio doesn't make much, does it? You're always traveling for work. Come here and give me a shoulder massage, and I'll drive you there later." I replied, "It's fine. I can drive myself." I practically ran out of the house, trying to escape. When I reached the underground parking lot, I received a call from Rose. She asked, "Robert, where's the oil?" "It's in the cabinet under the stove." She asked again, "Which one's the salt and which one's the sugar?" "The salt's on the left, sugar's on the right in the spice jar." I gritted my teeth as I answered. I couldn't believe that Rose was cooking breakfast for Ethan. It was clear that love and indifference couldn't be more obvious. I closed my eyes for a moment. Maybe it was time to put an end to this. I'd be leaving soon. Just as I was about to start the car, I noticed the fuel gauge was empty. When I got out to check, I found that all 4 tires had been slashed. I couldn't take it anymore. These awful stalker fans would do anything for their idol. I pounded the side of the car in frustration, my fingers leaving deep imprints on the shiny surface. Just as I walked out of the parking garage, ready to grab a cab and go to the company to quit, a car suddenly drove straight toward me. I had no time to dodge, and the impact sent me crashing into a flower bed. The car sped off, leaving me behind. I struggled to pull out my phone and call Rose, but no one picked up. Looking at my bloody hand, I realized I had been slashed by the flower bed when I was hit. Then everything went black. When I woke up again, I found myself in a hospital. A sanitation worker had found me and brought me in. The nurse had tried calling Rose, but she never answered. Then the TV showed a broadcast of the Liu Group's CEO, Mr. Liu, and Ethan touring the company. The comments below were all full of well wishes, hoping the two of them would find happiness together. Chapter 9. I stared faintly at the 2 people on the TV. Their sweetness was almost unbearable. Despite the pain in my hand, I forced myself to say, "I'll sign it myself." After signing, I fell unconscious again. When I woke up, the room was pitch dark, and I was alone. I moved my body to turn on the light. I hated the dark. Even though there were dim street lights outside, the silence was eerily frightening. My fingers were wrapped in thick bandages, my whole body in pain, but thankfully, my legs were still intact. At that moment, I received a message from the studio. I glanced at it, and the boss said the photos from the last shoot were great and encouraged me to keep up the good work. I thought for a while and decided to tell the boss I was resigning. I called and said, "Sorry, boss, I want to resign. I originally wanted to talk to you in person and hand over everything, but now I'm in the hospital after being hit by a car, so I can only tell you this over the phone." The boss asked, "Hit by a car? What happened?" I didn't answer. After all, in City C, I didn't have any friends. Even if I knew who did this, I couldn't find any evidence. He said, "Don't worry, I have some connections here. Tell me what happened, and I'll investigate it for you." Tears welled up in my eyes. I didn't expect that in my moment of solitude and helplessness, it was the studio boss who was willing to help me. He said, I'll come over in the afternoon to discuss the details with you. In the afternoon, the boss came over with some fruit. As soon as he saw me lying in bed, his eyes were filled with pity. I felt guilty and said, Thank you, boss, for coming to see me. He said, It's nothing, but are you really resigning? I replied, Yes, I'm afraid continuing like this will only drag the studio down. The boss angrily said, How could that be? Those people are nothing to worry about. Just then, the boss's phone rang. Boss, it's bad. Someone sprayed paint all over the studio. You should come back and take a look. What? Who did this? The boss asked. We checked the surveillance, and it was a bunch of underage kids. Underage? I apologized. Boss, I'm sorry for dragging you into this. He replied, This isn't your fault. Why are you blaming yourself? I think the people behind this were intentionally targeting you. I nodded and said, Those little brats are Ethan's stalker fans. Since they're all minors, even if they kill or set fire, they won't face any legal consequences. Ethan? Is that the boyfriend of your sister? I said yes. Ethan is the boyfriend of my sister. The boss said, Seems like Ethan is more cunning than I thought. He doesn't do it himself, but incites his fans to target you. I said, Boss, I'll compensate for the damages to the studio, and also, I'll be heading back home soon. Can you keep my resignation private? He asked, Do you not want your sister to know? I nodded. All right, he said. When the boss left, he didn't make me pay anything. In fact, after hearing I was getting married, he not only waived the compensation, but even gave me extra salary as a wedding gift. He said, Remember to send me an invitation when you get married. I'll come to cheer you on. Okay, the boss left with a smile. I spent a few more days in the hospital, lost in thought. During that time, Rose didn't call once, and I had given up on her. Finally, I was discharged after my stitches were removed. The boss called to say he had found some evidence. However, when he was preparing to sue the stalker fans, L Corporation was worried about how it would affect Ethan's reputation. So they paid a large sum of money to cover it up. No one dared to report on it. I had already known this would be the outcome. When I returned home, still weak from my injuries, the house was as empty as ever. It seemed Rose hadn't been back in a while. As I went to the storage room to grab my suitcase, I found my belongings in disarray, thrown on the floor. The photos of me were slashed with a sharp object, and my diary, where I wrote all my affection for Rose, had been torn to shreds. At that moment, my phone buzzed with a notification. An excerpt from my diary, detailing my feelings for Rose, had been posted online. The backlash was immediate, with the internet flooded with people condemning me, calling me shameless for having feelings for my own sister. I was stunned. Rose's angry voice came through the phone. Robert, I told you before that our relationship shouldn't be exposed. Why did you do this? Don't you know that doing this won't just ruin me, but will ruin you too? It might even take down the entire L Corporation with you. I had nothing to say. After all, those affectionate words in the diary were mine. Rose then issued a statement through L Corporation, claiming that she and I only had a sibling relationship and no romantic feelings at all. Fine. In that case, let's end it here. I gathered my belongings from the floor, threw the photos into the charcoal stove to burn them. After cleaning up the storage room, I packed up what little luggage I had left and prepared to leave. At that moment, Rose rushed in. She slapped me across the face as soon as she entered. Robert, look at what you've done. Do you know that because of that diary, the stock price of Lu Corporation has plummeted? I said, This isn't my fault. You might want to look into who did it. I turned my head and stared directly at Rose. Ethan placed his hand on Rose's shoulder, smiling as he cryptically said, Rose, I think there's something fishy about this. Maybe someone with bad intentions, or perhaps certain people were used by our enemies. Rose said, Fine, if I find out you did this, I won't let you off the hook. After saying that, she didn't even notice my pale face. Ethan shot me a cold look, a smile of victory flickering in his eyes. In the end, it was the stalker fans who did all this, and it had nothing to do with him. Besides, those fans were minors. Even if I wanted to sue them, I had nowhere to go. Ethan probably just wanted to watch Rose slowly become disillusioned with me and return to his side. I stood there stubbornly, waiting until their figures disappeared before I took out my phone and called a cab to the airport. When I sat in the cab, I glanced back at the villa I had lived in for 6 years. It held so many memories of Rose and me, happy ones, romantic ones, moments filled with joy, and other intimate memories. But now it didn't matter anymore. She no longer belonged to me. The cab drove off. At City C Airport, when the plane landed, I slowly looked away, returning my gaze to the real world. I was back after 6 years. During those 6 years, I hardly ever came back. My parents and 2 older sisters would send videos every year during the holidays, asking why I didn't come back. I would always use the excuse that work was too busy to return. Once, when my older sisters insisted on coming to spend the new year with me, I ended up temporarily moving into the apartment they had bought for me. I tidied up and decorated it just enough to appease them. My relationship with Rose was a secret that couldn't be exposed. Over the years, I had kept this secret, and the love no one knew about lived in both pain and sweetness. But now I no longer wanted it. I took my suitcase and walked through the crowd, leaving the airport. The familiar buildings caught my eye. After all these years, the airport hadn't changed a bit. It looked just the same as when I left 6 years ago. But 6 years had passed, and everything was different. I was no longer the naive young man I had been back then. I was now a mature man. My older sister's call came through. "Robert, are you really back this time? You're not fooling me, are you?" Her voice sounded uncertain, as if she thought I was lying again. "Yes, I'm back, and this time I'm not leaving." My sister replied, "Not leaving? Well, now that you're back, let's get married. We're all waiting for you to carry on the family line and have children." I laughed. "Big sis, don't tease me. By the way, when are you going to find me a brother-in-law?" She said, "Forget about a brother-in-law. I'm busy right now and can't pick you up, but I've sent your fiancée to meet you. She should be arriving soon." I nodded. All right. I was actually curious to see what my fiancée, whom I had never met, looked like. From what my sister said, they seemed very pleased with her. If they were satisfied, that was good enough for me. I trusted my family not to set me up. However, I waited outside the airport for a long time, getting increasingly anxious. I took out my phone to ask where she was. Just then, I heard the roar of a motorcycle engine. I looked up, and the bike came straight toward me. I could see that the rider was a young woman, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration for her. But why was she riding straight at me? I took a step back, almost losing my balance on the stairs. Just as I steadied myself, the motorcycle braked sharply and stopped right in front of me. I stared blankly at the young woman on the bike. She was dressed in a leather jacket, her long legs encased in leather boots and pants that hugged her graceful figure. Her slender fingers pulled off her black helmet, revealing her dark, glossy hair. She was effortlessly cool. I had never seen a woman ride a motorcycle so confidently and stylishly before. Actually, I'd always had a dream of riding a motorcycle when I was younger. Back then, motorcycles weren't as common, and I thought people who rode them were incredibly cool. My family had many motorcycle models, but they discouraged me from riding, worried about the danger. So as I grew up, my interests changed. Now, I still think people who ride motorcycles are cool. As the bike revved to life, I tightened my grip around Valentina's waist. With one hand injured, I could only use my other hand to hold on tightly. My arm wrapped around her slender waist, pressing my body close to her back. From this position, I could tell that the girl in front of me was small in size. I had noticed earlier that she seemed to be about a head shorter than me. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of Valentina's lips curving slightly into a smile. The motorcycle was fast. Before long, we arrived at a city hospital, and the bike came to a smooth stop at the entrance. When I got off, my legs felt numb, and I felt a bit lightheaded, likely from motion sickness. Thankfully, Valentina quickly reached out and caught me, preventing me from fainting right there at the hospital entrance. I felt embarrassed and quickly muttered, "Thanks." She nodded and said, "Let's go inside. I'll have someone check on your injury." Valentina casually took out the motorcycle key, then grabbed my uninjured left hand, leading me inside. The head nurse greeted her with a smile. "Valentina, you're here. Your mom's in surgery." As soon as the nurse saw Valentina, she couldn't help but tease her. Valentina was the daughter of Dr. Sue, and at her age, not dating had become a frequent topic of gossip among the nurses. The nurses often joked about how someone so accomplished in her childhood could still be single at this age. Now that Valentina was older and more beautiful, the teasing had only increased, and with the pressure of her single status, she was constantly mocked by those around her. Valentina rolled her eyes inwardly. She had forgotten that it was Nurse Lee who was on duty today. Had she known, she might have taken Robert to a different hospital to avoid this awkward situation. It was hard to put up with the teasing from the nurses. She knew that being good-looking and successful as a child only attracted jealousy, and now as an adult, her beauty seemed to attract even more unwelcome attention. People never seemed satisfied with her, but today things would be different. Today, she was bringing Robert here to show everyone that she wasn't someone who couldn't find a man. She had simply been waiting for the right one. She wasn't going to let people talk behind her back anymore. "Mrs. Lee, this is my fiancé, Robert," Valentina said proudly, introducing me without hesitation. She didn't hide the fact that Robert was her fiancé. After all, he was handsome enough to make many girls swoon, and she was happy to show him off. There were rumors in the city about him having a girlfriend for several years, but he never made it public. Valentina couldn't care less about that. The man she had chosen was hers, and no one else would take him. Mrs. Lee, I've already told you he's my fiancé. We've known each other since childhood and were promised to each other long ago. The reason I didn't date anyone before was that I was waiting for him to come back. He's just returned from overseas, Valentina explained. Mrs. Lee remarked, just returned from abroad. So he's an overseas returnee. Her eyes were filled with even more jealousy. I couldn't help but chuckle at Valentina's words. Overseas returnee? More like a sea turtle. Valentina quickly shot back. All right, Mrs. Lee, do you really want to fight with me for him? Now that I finally brought my fiancé back, she immediately moved to stand protectively behind me, her posture defensive, almost like she was shielding me. Mrs. Lee waved it off with a laugh. Oh, I was just joking with you. Don't take it seriously. Anyway, I need to get back to work. Your mom's in surgery. You go ahead and sit in her office for a while. Still grinning, Valentina warned, got it. And Mrs. Lee, don't ever try to introduce me to any more of those weird, mismatched men. I find it disgusting. Mrs. Lee's face turned a shade of black, and she quickly muttered, No, I won't. Then hastily left, trying to cover up her embarrassment with a forced laugh. Once the nurse had left, Valentina stuck her tongue out at her retreating figure, making a playful face. I watched her, amused by how mischievous she was. Smiling, I tugged lightly on her arm and whispered, All right, don't be angry. You're my fiancé. No one can steal you away. Valentina's confidence faltered a bit as she looked up at me and asked, Really? Yeah, really. I answered. This little girl seems so sharp, yet she's so easily reassured. If she were any more naive, I might have said she was being tricked into this, just like how my older sisters had tricked her into being my fiancé. With a satisfied smile, Valentina said, Then let's go. Her furrowed brows finally relaxed, and a soft smile tugged at her lips. She grabbed my hand and pulled me toward her mother's office. As we entered, my gaze fell on a family portrait on the desk. Wait, the man in the photo looked familiar. Valentina noticed my gaze and explained, That's my dad. You should remember him. When you were little, you were always so naughty and cried a lot. My dad used to take you home with him sometimes for meals, and after that, you didn't cry so much anymore. Ah, those were the old days, I said, feeling a little embarrassed. I used to cry a lot when I was younger, and there was a kind teacher who once joked with me, saying I had a beautiful little sister at home, and that one day she would marry me. Back then, I only knew that she was really pretty, and I liked her. I always followed her around, calling her sister and bringing her candy whenever I had some. I had two older sisters who were much older than me, and they spoiled me, buying me candy and treats whenever I got something delicious. I'd save some to share with the little girl. I never expected that the little sister I used to share candy with would turn out to be Valentina, the girl who once jokingly said she would marry me when we grew up. Valentina suddenly leaned in closer, grabbing the collar of my shirt. Robert, do you remember what you promised me when we were little? I had no choice but to look down at her. Her small hands clutched my shirt, and she asked, What did I say? Did I say something inappropriate back then? She narrowed her eyes, a smirk playing at the corners of her lips. You told me that if I ate your candy, I'd have to marry you when we grew up and be your wife. I blinked, confused. Did I really say that? I'm honestly a little lost. After all, it was something that happened when we were kids, and I couldn't remember all the details. Had I promised her something like that? She snorted and said, Oh, you don't want to admit it, huh? I quickly defended myself. No, I just really don't remember. At that moment, a soft voice called out from behind us. Valentina turned around and said, Mom, you're back already. She let go of my collar and glanced at her mother with a somewhat awkward look, like a child who had been caught doing something wrong. I quickly adjusted my collar and turned to face Mrs. Sue. Mrs. Sue smiled at me and said, If I didn't come back, you would have scared my son-in-law away. Her smile was warm, and I couldn't help but return it. I greeted her politely, Hello, Mrs. Sue. I looked at Mrs. Sue, noting her gentle expression, which reminded me of a mother's warmth. It made me feel strangely comforted, and for a brief moment, I felt a pang of homesickness for my own mother. Mrs. Sue walked over and gently smoothed the wrinkles on my shirt caused by Valentina's earlier grip. Good boy, you're back. That's all that matters. Thank you, Mrs. Sue, I said, stretching my hand toward her. When I saw my injured hand, I quickly withdrew it, feeling the awkwardness creeping up on me. Mrs. Sue noticed and asked, What happened to your hand? Let me see. Her eyes filled with concern as she gazed at the bandage wound on my hand. It's nothing. I just tripped, I explained, trying to downplay the injury. You tripped and hurt yourself this badly? She asked, clearly unconvinced. She carefully unwrapped the bandages, revealing a long cut that ran down from my wrist, twisting down my arm. Thankfully, my palm was unaffected. Who did this to you? She asked, her voice sharp with concern. Valentina, standing nearby, looked at my hand with a trace of hurt in her eyes. Her voice became soft and filled with worry. How did this happen? It looks so bad. I quickly reassured her. I'm fine. Don't cry. I hadn't expected her to be so sensitive. It was a surprise to realize that besides my parents and sisters, there were others who cared enough to be concerned about me. Mrs. Sue asked again, "Are you sure you're okay with a wound like this?" I hesitated for a moment, then answered, "Actually, I didn't want to make Valentina worry." Mrs. Sue raised an eyebrow. "You're telling me that this was just a fall?" I reluctantly admitted it was a car accident. She paused, her eyes narrowing. "A car accident? Who caused it?" I felt a twinge of discomfort and replied, "A group of stalker fans. Some unruly kids." She raised an eyebrow. "Were they minors?" I said, a little embarrassed, nodding. Mrs. Sue nodded thoughtfully. "I understand, but I'm going to check those wounds. If they're not treated properly, they could leave permanent scars." I tried to reassure her. "I've already had them treated at a hospital in another city." She shook her head. "No, I'm not taking any chances. I want to examine them myself." So Mrs. Sue had Valentina stay with me while I went through a full checkup. Thankfully, the other injuries were healing well, and none of my internal organs had been affected. The only injury that looked particularly bad was the scar on my hand, which looked pretty gruesome. In the end, Mrs. Sue rebandaged my wound herself, making sure it was well taken care of before letting Valentina and me leave. After Valentina and Mrs. Sue left, Mrs. Sue made a phone call to inform the lost sisters about Robert's accident. Upon hearing that their precious younger brother was hurt, both sisters were furious and immediately began looking into who might have hurt Robert in City A. Meanwhile, in City A, Rose had just finished dealing with work matters and was dragging her exhausted body back home. To her surprise, Robert was not waiting for her in the living room as he usually did. No matter how late Rose came home, Robert would always wait for her, sometimes reading, other times looking through photos on his camera, editing them on his computer, or even sketching. But tonight, the house felt strangely empty, and there was no sign of Robert. Rose kicked off her high heels and walked barefoot on the cold floor toward the sofa. Normally, Robert would have noticed her cold feet and brought over her slippers, gently warming them with his hands before helping her put them on. Sitting on the sofa, she furrowed her brow and dialed Robert's number, only to hear a cold mechanical voice on the other end. "Sorry, the number you've dialed is currently unavailable." Rose stared at the phone in disbelief. Could Robert be angry with her? After all, in 6 years of living together, she had never once called him, but it was because of him that her company's stocks had plummeted, and now he was upset with her. She dialed her assistant's number, trying to focus. "Get me the latest photography equipment," she ordered. She remembered that a few days ago, Ethan had accidentally broken Robert's gear, and she had promised to buy him a new set, hoping this would smooth things over with Robert. Rose paused for a moment before heading upstairs, lost in thought. She found herself standing in front of Robert's room and instinctively reached out to open the door. But once inside, she realized everything was different. Robert's belongings were gone, replaced by Ethan's things, his clothes, hats, and even some music equipment. Then it hit her. Ethan had mentioned that his house didn't have heating, so he would stay with her. She had agreed, and Ethan had moved into Robert's room. But she hadn't fully processed it until now. The house only had 2 rooms, hers and Robert's. If Ethan was in Robert's room, then where had Robert been sleeping that morning? Robert had left without even changing clothes. Had he frantically packed and left? She ran to the storage room, hoping to find some trace of him, but it was empty, devoid of any of Robert's things. No bed, no belongings, not even a single scrap of paper. It was as if he had completely disappeared from her life. Rose collapsed onto the sofa, regret flooding over her. She had been wrong to hit him. He had always been so good to her. Why had she done that? It was her own refusal to publicly acknowledge his place in her life. She had only wanted him to stay by her side, even if he was just her kept man. Just then, Ethan's call came through. "Rose, one of my fans has gotten into some trouble. Can you help me out?" As she listened to Ethan on the phone, a shadow crossed Rose's eyes. When had her relationship with Robert changed so drastically? It seemed like it all started the day Ethan returned to the country. Ethan came back that day, and Robert had insisted she eat with him before leaving. It had been Robert's birthday. How could she have forgotten such an important detail? In the past, she would buy Robert a new set of photography equipment every year because he loved photography, and no price was too high for the best equipment. Now she finally realized why Robert had gotten angry and upset. It was because she had bought the equipment, not him. "Rose, are you listening?" Ethan's voice broke through her thoughts. "What's the matter?" Rose responded distantly, her mind swirling with memories of Robert. Ethan continued, "It's just a fan issue. They're not letting it go, and you know how it is with fans when they screw up. the idol has to pay. So I understand. I'll have my assistant take care of it. Rose replied curtly, already, and dialed her assistant's number. Once the call ended, she sat there, feeling emptier than ever that night. She didn't go to bed, but stayed on the sofa, the memories of her time with Robert replaying in her mind. Every night when she came home, he would be waiting in the living room, urging her to go take a shower. By the time she got out, he would have already prepared the essential oils and massaged her with the kind of expertise that felt as good as any spa. She would always lie back, completely satisfied, enjoying the happiness he gave her. Now all of that was gone. The next morning, Rose decided to go to Robert's former studio. She found it was under renovation and couldn't understand why. After some effort, she managed to get the studio owner's phone number. When she called, the man hung up immediately when he realized it was the CEO of L Group calling. Not giving up, Rose dialed again, and finally, the owner answered, clearly frustrated. Lou, we're just a small studio. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? Rose clenched her jaw, holding back her frustration. Where has Robert been sent recently? The studio owner replied curtly. How should I know? He went anyway. He's resigned. The man hung up the phone abruptly. Rose was left stunned, her heart racing with panic. Resigned? Where could he have gone? Then it struck her. He had mentioned that a relative back home was getting married, so maybe he had gone back for the wedding. She tried to reassure herself, but deep down, she was filled with unease. What if Robert had gone back and never came back? In a rush, Rose dialed Helen's number. The phone barely rang before Helen picked up. Helen, did Robert go back? Rose asked anxiously, her voice tight. Yes, he did. He came back yesterday. All these years, we've really appreciated how much you've cared for Robert, Helen responded. Rose felt a bit awkward at the praise. It was the least I could do. It seemed that Helen still had no idea about her relationship with Robert. She had insisted on keeping things private, but now her decision was coming back to haunt her. After a brief pause, Helen asked, Do you know about Robert's little girlfriend? Rose's heart skipped a beat, and her voice tensed. I don't know, she quickly denied, trying to sound casual. But the nervousness in her tone was evident. Oh, never mind. By the way, are you free in a couple of days to attend a wedding? Helen didn't push further. It seemed she had made peace with the fact that Robert was back, and any talk of the little girlfriend was likely forgotten. Sure, I'll be there. Oh, and by the way, we're having a wedding soon. You should come. Rose blinked in confusion. A wedding? Yes, a wedding. Robert's relative is getting married. Remember, Rose? Rose wasn't quite sure how to end the call, but knew she had to. After all, Robert had said he was going home for a wedding, and it couldn't possibly be his own wedding. Helen was a staunch believer in not getting married, so it must have been Rebecca. As Helen hung up the phone, the door swung open, and Rebecca stormed in, her face flushed with anger. Helen looked up, concerned. What's wrong? Did you find something? Rebecca tossed a pile of papers onto the table in front of her sister. Take a look for yourself, Rebecca said. The two sisters had always been protective of their younger brother. They couldn't afford to be careless, especially when Robert, the precious younger brother they had raised with so much care, was wronged in City A. They had to find the person responsible. Helen's eyes widened as she went through the shocking images in front of her. There were photos of Robert being beaten and locked in a bathroom, his parcels intercepted and burned, and even a picture of him being hit by a car. Helen's gaze fixed on the familiar villa in the background of one of the photos. She quickly pulled out her phone and scrolled through her gallery. Sure enough, in a selfie Rose had sent her, the same villa appeared in the background. Helen mumbled to herself. Could it be that all these years, Robert's hidden girlfriend was Rebecca? Noticing her sister's realization, Rebecca leaned in. Who? Who is it? Helen didn't immediately respond. She stared at the photo, comparing it with the one she had just found. After a moment, her eyes met Rebecca's. No words were needed, the connection was clear. Finally, Helen spoke. Who's the one bullying Robert in these photos? Did you find out? Rebecca nodded. It's Ethan's fans. They hurt Robert in their attempt to protect Ethan. Ethan? Helen repeated in disbelief. You mean Rose's fiancé? Helen's anger boiled over. So Rose was not only involved with my brother, but also still entangled with Ethan? Rebecca sighed. Sister, Robert must be heartbroken. Though frustrated, Helen calmed down. At least Robert's back now. If he hadn't. Rebecca gave a small, reassuring smile. Don't worry. Valentina is a good girl. She'll take care of him. Helen nodded, finally at ease. Good. At least Robert's had a rough time, but now he's found someone who truly cares for him. When the two sisters finally returned home, the house was filled with the hustle and bustle of both families. Lou's mother called them over cheerfully. Helen, Rebecca, come here. Noticing the serious expressions on their faces, Robert couldn't help but joke. Hey, what took you so long? I'm about to starve here. Valentina, ever attentive, immediately picked up a peeled shrimp and placed it in Robert's mouth. Eat first and stop talking, she said. Robert's heart softened. He had always been the one feeding others, but just now, he saw Valentina quietly putting a shrimp in his plate when no one was looking, then carefully peeling it for him. He thought she liked shrimp and planned to peel more for her later. But instead, she fed him the shrimp. No one had ever cared for him like this, except for his parents. He was deeply moved. The family watched the couple, and a soft, affectionate smile appeared on everyone's faces. It was clear to them that this relationship was solid. After a while, they all sat down to eat. Because of the bandages on Robert's hand, Valentina did all the feeding for him, and Robert, despite his usually picky tastes, ate everything she offered without complaint. Sue's mother couldn't help but smile. Robert eats anything, doesn't he? Really easy to take care of. Watching the two of them, she felt a sense of relief. She wasn't worried that Robert would bully Valentina. Her concern was more about Valentina possibly taking advantage of Robert, but she was confident that Valentina truly cared for him, so she had nothing to fear. The conversation turned to wedding arrangements, dowries, and the couple's future home. Eventually, the elders pushed the two of them out to walk in the garden for some privacy. Valentina looked at Robert with a hint of hesitation. Robert, do you really want to marry me? She asked. She still couldn't quite believe it. If she had known Robert would get hurt, she would have flown to city much earlier. She regretted not doing so. Now her fiancé had a hand injury. Thankfully, it wasn't on his face, but she still felt so much heartache for him. Robert nodded. Yes, he replied. He couldn't help but compare Valentina to Rose. Valentina was energetic, playful, and a little bold, everything a girl of her age should be. Rose, on the other hand, had a much colder personality. When she got angry, she could go silent for days, creating an oppressive atmosphere. It was as if Rose had always treated him as a placeholder, someone who wasn't her real choice. When Ethan came back, it was clear she would drop him without hesitation. But Valentina was different. She was warm and caring and had truly opened her heart to him. Then it's decided. No backing out, Valentina said suddenly, wrapping her arms around Robert's neck. Standing on tiptoe, she kissed him on the lips. Robert, momentarily stunned, felt his heart melt as he gazed at the girl in his arms. His emotions were overwhelming. Valentina grinned. I've sealed the deal. You're my fiancé now. No takebacks, all right. Robert replied softly, holding her close and deepening the kiss. I've sealed it too. No takebacks. As they stood there kissing in the garden, a picture of pure affection, their future seemed more certain than ever. After seeing off Valentina's family, Helen and Rebecca made their way to Robert's room. Helen looked at her brother with a concerned expression. Robert, have you really thought this through? She asked. Helen knew that over the years, Rose had taken care of Robert for 6 years. There was a chance that feelings had already developed between them. It was her call that had brought Robert back, but they hadn't considered Robert's feelings in all of this. As his older sisters, that was their fault. Robert nodded, his expression steady. Yes, I've thought it through. I want to marry Valentina, he said. He glanced at his older sisters. After seeing off Valentina's family, Helen and Rebecca made their way to Robert's room. Helen looked at her brother with a concerned expression. Robert, have you really thought this through? She asked. Helen knew that over the years, Rose had taken care of Robert for 6 years. There was a chance that feelings had already developed between them. It was her call that had brought Robert back, but they hadn't considered Robert's feelings in all of this. As his older sisters, that was their fault. Robert nodded, his expression steady. Yes, I've thought it through. I want to marry Valentina, he said. He glanced at his older sisters, wondering if they had already begun planning the wedding procedures. Are you sure? Helen asked again, her voice filled with doubt. She seemed to be searching his face for any sign of deception. Robert replied with a small smile. I'm sure. Thinking of Valentina, he felt nothing but warmth. Compared to Rose's cold and distant gaze, Valentina's smile felt like home. Helen nodded, seemingly satisfied. That's good. If that's the case, then you should cut ties with that little girlfriend back in the city. It's better to end things cleanly. Robert reassured them. Don't worry, big sis, second sis. There won't be any more contact with her from now on. At his words, both sisters finally relaxed. Though there was an unspoken question lingering in the air why Robert had been hurt, neither pressed the issue. It was clear that for Robert's sake, they didn't want to add to his burdens. The wedding was set to take place in about a week, and Robert would be busier than usual with preparations. His sisters, wanting to respect his decision, didn't want to complicate matters further. In the city, Rose sat at her desk, her mind consumed by thoughts of Robert. She couldn't shake the feeling that his departure had a deeper cause. Something wasn't right. Just then, her assistant entered with a package. Rose tore it open, and as she glanced at the photos inside, her hands began to tremble. How could this be? Robert had been bullied over the past few days. No, it wasn't just once. The photos showed Robert trapped in a hotel bathroom, beaten. She recognized that night it was when she had left him on the side of the road to take a taxi to the banquet. Now she realized the area had been isolated, with few taxis around. Had he walked to the hotel? Each photo was more disturbing than the last. There was even a picture of Robert getting hit by a car in front of a villa. Rose's heart skipped a beat as she realized this had happened while she was at the company with Ethan. Looking at the date, Rose felt a wave of panic. Robert must have been terrified. If it hadn't been for a passing cleaner, he might have been left there to die. Who did this to him? Her voice shook as she ordered. Find out who did this. Her assistant, equally stunned by the photos, rushed out to investigate. Rose, her hands still trembling, tried to reach Robert on WeChat, but his account was blocked. She tried everything she could think of, but all attempts to contact him were futile. In a rush, she called her assistant again. Have you found out anything? She asked. The assistant hesitated before replying. It was Ethan's fans, the ones who stalk him. They did it to Robert. Rose paused, stunned. Her mind started piecing things together. The discarded film rolls, the day when Ethan had specifically made her go back to pick someone up, all the clues fell into place. Ethan had orchestrated this. He had deliberately targeted Robert, wanting him out of the picture so Rose would eventually give up on him. And Rose had been too blind to see it. She had let Ethan play both sides, not realizing that she could never have both him and Robert. Just then, Rose's best friend called. Rose, your little boyfriend is getting married. Helen invited us to the wedding. Are you going? Rose was in shock. What did you say? Her friend replied. Your little boyfriend. But I'm curious. How could you two be so close? And now he's suddenly getting married. Isn't the bride supposed to be you? Rose's mind raced. Her voice faltered as she replied. No, it's impossible. He said he was going back to attend a relative's wedding. Her friend laughed. What relative? And why would we be invited to a relative's wedding? You know I wouldn't even be able to attend if it weren't for you taking care of Robert all these years. The words hit Rose like a ton of bricks. I see. Thanks. I'll hang up now. Without another word, Rose hung up the phone and immediately instructed her assistant to book a flight to City C. She had to find out the truth for herself. In City C, today was the day Robert and Valentina were going to register their marriage. After discussions between both families, it was decided that they would first register their marriage, and the wedding ceremony would take place later once Robert's hand healed. Both families were now searching for effective scar removal creams, hoping to cover up the deep scars on Robert's arm before the wedding. For Robert, it didn't matter much, but for his little girlfriend, every glance at the injury pained her. Don't worry. I'm fine, Robert comforted her, trying to soothe her concerns. Valentina, however, was still visibly upset. She was the type to be easily comforted by a small gesture, and a simple piece of candy could cheer her up. The night before, she had discovered that the woman Robert had been with for 6 years was now in City C, and they still hadn't officially registered their marriage. Robert chuckled as he saw Valentina waiting outside in leather pants and jacket, holding a helmet and leaning against a motorcycle. It's so early. The civil affairs office isn't even open yet, he said. As she stood there, the cool morning air made her look even more striking, and the motorcycle next to her added to her strong yet graceful image. If Robert's hand were healed, he would have certainly liked to ride it with her. He quickly opened the door, pulling her inside. Aren't you cold dressed like that? Robert reached out to hold her hand, feeling the slight chill in her fingers. His heart ached a little as he slowly transferred warmth from his own hand to hers. It's fine, Valentina replied with a soft smile, enjoying the warmth from Robert's hand. She thought to herself, if only I could hold his hand like this forever. Valentina, you're here so early, said Mrs. Law as she came downstairs. She noticed how Robert's eyes were entirely focused on Valentina, and a warm smile spread across her face. The girl was eager, but she thought it was a little too much. Robert wasn't all that special, he was just good-looking and gentle, without any great strengths. It was puzzling how such a beautiful girl had set her sights on him. In her younger days, Mrs. Law wouldn't have cared for such a son-in-law, one who was handsome but useless. Robert was the only son, pampered from childhood, with 2 sisters running the family business, so he hadn't had much pressure in life. It was only now that he had finally found a woman he wanted to be with. At least this girl seemed good, obedient, and sweet. Valentina said, Mrs. Law, I'm going with Robert to try on wedding dresses today. We might be a little late returning. I hope you don't mind. Mrs. Law smiled knowingly. Of course not. You two are officially husband and wife now. The sooner you have a baby, the better. The implication was obvious. Registering meant they were a married couple, and a married couple, well, that led to the honeymoon, didn't it? Mrs. Law was quick to pick up on Valentina's meaning. Robert felt awkward, his little girlfriend being cheeky, and now his mother was getting in on it too. Mrs. Law waved it off. All right. Valentina, go ahead and have breakfast first. Don't go hungry. She took Valentina's hand and led her to the breakfast table, leaving Robert to watch a little disheartened that his mother now had a new priority, his future wife. After breakfast, Robert and Valentina left. Helen and Rebecca remained upstairs, not yet coming down. Helen answered Rose's call. Is Robert there? Rose asked, her voice a little anxious. Helen replied, My brother went with his fiancée today to register their marriage. What do you need him for? Rose's voice quivered with panic. Where is the civil affairs office? Where are they registering? Helen could sense the urgency in her voice. Rose, I think we should meet and talk, Helen said. She didn't want Rose to interfere with Robert and Valentina's marriage registration. After all, Valentina was the one everyone had accepted as Robert's fiancée. Rose was 5 years older than Robert, and though Robert was young and naive, didn't Rose understand what she was doing? Helen began to regret ever asking Rose to look after Robert all those years. Please, Helen, Rose pleaded, her voice breaking. Please tell me where they are registering. I need to know. Helen's voice grew colder. Sorry, I can't tell you. You and Robert are over. On the other end of the line, Rose crumpled. She collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her face as she realized that Robert was really gone. Meanwhile, Robert and Valentina had bypassed all formalities with the help of a green channel, and in less than half an hour, they had completed their marriage registration. Valentina immediately shared the good news on social media, posting a picture of their marriage certificates along with a cute photo of the two of them making a heart with their hands. Robert's right hand, which was still bandaged, had been retouched in the image by Valentina. The post quickly caused a stir. Friends and acquaintances flooded Valentina's post with congratulations, comments, and new wedding gift red envelopes. Valentina had even removed Rose from her blacklist, allowing her to see the post. As Rose stared at the photo, it hit her like a ton of bricks. She had truly lost Robert, the one she had loved so deeply. No, this wasn't what she wanted. This wasn't supposed to happen. Desperate, Rose ordered her assistant to track Robert's location. Moments later, she received the updated GPS coordinates. Following the location, Rose arrived at the wedding dress shop where she saw Robert and Valentina trying on wedding dresses together. Robert sat silently at the side, gazing at the wedding dress designs in the book. Beside him sat a quiet figure whom he assumed to be another client, also selecting a dress. He didn't look up and continued admiring the pictures of wedding gowns in his hands. There were many styles: Chinese, Western, and blends of both. He thought, no matter which one it was, his little girlfriend would look great in it. Rose's voice came through, fragile and almost broken. Her ethereal tone echoed, Robert. The hand that had been flipping through the pictures froze for a moment. He looked up in surprise to see Rose beside him, her eyes swollen with tears, her face streaked with sorrow. What happened to her? He wanted to reach out and wipe away her tears. If it were before, he would have never wanted to see her cry. But now, he forcefully held back his hand. His eyes went from confusion to a deep sense of sorrow, then gradually turning to indifference. But he couldn't bring himself to say the words to push her away. After all, 6 years of feelings weren't something you could sever so easily. However, his heart had already calmed. He was no longer the naive person he had been 6 years ago, when he didn't understand love. That diary was filled with his feelings for Rose from the first moment he saw her. He was attracted to this beautiful, older woman. Only when he found out that he was just a substitute did he realize that when she looked at him, she wasn't truly seeing him, but was using him to look at someone else. In his dreams at night, she would often call his name, though he could never hear it clearly. Robert, or perhaps it was Ethan. Just as he was thinking about how to ask Rose to leave before his little girlfriend noticed, a voice interrupted. Sister, here's a tissue for you. Valentina, who had just finished trying on wedding dresses, noticed the beautiful woman sitting next to him, crying, as if she had lost something dear. She walked over, picked up a napkin from the side, and handed it to Rose. Rose asked, Who are you? Valentina replied, I'm Robert's fiancée. Are you here for our wedding? You're a bit early, though. The wedding is still a few days away. The main reason is that Robert hurt his hand, so he might not be able to hold the ring. As she spoke, she subtly lifted his sleeve, revealing the grotesque scar underneath, seemingly to check, but really to observe Rose's reaction. Rose, flustered, asked, How did this happen? Valentina smiled. Sister, from now on, I'll be the one to protect my fiancé. You don't need to worry about him anymore. She emphasized the word sister, letting the words slide slowly between her teeth. Rose fell silent. Valentina continued, Don't blame yourself. It's not your fault. In fact, I should thank you for sending such a great man to me. I stood to the side, thinking that this girl had a very strong sense of jealousy. I could practically feel the jealousy in the air. Rose nervously turned to me and said, "Robert, I'm sorry. I didn't know about this, but I'll go back and investigate." I said, "Sister, I'm already married. This is my fiancé. Our wedding is in a week, and I'd love for you to come." I also felt that Ethan was the one behind all of this and that it had nothing to do with Rose. But I was just a substitute, and that bothered me. After all these years of being her arm candy, I had let go of it. But what did it mean that she was here now? Was she trying to hold me back? Did she want me to go back to being her fool? No. Back then, I was young and didn't care, but now I couldn't be reckless anymore. Besides, Valentina was amazing. She always put me first and centered everything around me. Unlike me, who had spent 6 years revolving around Rose only to find that her heart had never warmed to me. Her heart was cold. The truth was, Rose didn't love me. She just wasn't used to not having someone around to serve her. She said, "Robert, please give me another chance." Rose reached out, grabbing my arm. Her voice was choking with tears, almost pleading as she was on the verge of kneeling. I replied, "Sister, from the moment Ethan returned and you had me call him brother-in-law, didn't that prove we're just like siblings? So what are you doing now? I'm not a good match for you. Ethan is. Please go back to him." She shook her head. "No, I won't go back. Robert, please, just one more chance." Valentina, in disbelief, said, "Sister, Robert respects you and calls you sister, but don't take advantage of that. We've already registered our marriage. We're a legal couple now, and our relationship is great. Don't try to break us up." Her anger flared in her eyes, burning brightly. In the next second, I placed my hand gently on her head and rubbed it lightly. The fiery anger in her eyes extinguished instantly, not a trace remained, and her gaze softened with a hint of affection for me. I said, "Sister, I don't love you anymore. I'll let you know about the wedding details after that." I withdrew my arm, gave Rose a cold look, took Valentina's hand, our fingers intertwined, and we slowly walked out together. Just as we were about to leave the store, the manager suddenly came out and stopped us. "Wait, miss, you're still wearing our shop's wedding dress," she said. I replied, "I've bought this dress," and took out a card, handing it to the store clerk. "All right, please wait a moment." The clerk returned the card to me respectfully. "I'm on my way out." There was a beautiful bride in a wedding dress riding a motorcycle and showing off with me in the streets. Before long, we became the latest hot topic, and many new couples even began to follow our example. Rose returned to the city, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and despair. Her assistant, clearly worried, escorted her back to the villa. The house was brightly lit, and when Rose arrived, she could hear the sounds of a party from within. When she opened the door, her eyes widened in shock. She had expected Ethan might invite a few fans over while she was away, but she never imagined the scene that greeted her. Ethan was holding the hand of a girl with brightly colored hair, singing. The girl's clothes were almost entirely torn off. A few men and women sat scattered across the couch, some covered in dirt, others with half of their clothes removed, looking dazed and disoriented. Were they on drugs? Ethan, thinking Rose was still away on a business trip, had invited these stalker fans over for some sort of party. When he saw Rose, he was taken aback, fear evident in his voice. "Rose, you're back," he said. Rose snapped, "Call the police." Her gaze burned with anger as she shot a look at her assistant. The living room was a mess, clothes thrown everywhere in chaos. The sight of it all made her sick. She had never imagined Ethan would be like this behind closed doors. She was utterly disappointed. Before, it was just her and Robert living here. Robert never brought people like this home, never had unclear relationships with other women. Her assistant nodded and immediately pulled out his phone to call the authorities. "Wait," Ethan shouted, panic rising in his voice. "You can't call the police." Rose shot back, "Ethan, this is my house. You've broken in." Ethan retorted, "Broken in? Didn't you invite me to live here? You've been away for a few days, and I was lonely, so I invited some friends over to hang out. What's the big deal?" His tone was arrogant and dismissive. Rose asked coldly, "Then tell me, what's wrong with them?" Her eyes drifted over to the people on the couch. It was obvious they were high on drugs, which was illegal. Ethan shrugged nonchalantly. "They're fine. They just get really sleepy at night, really." Rose didn't buy his lies for a second. She wasn't a child. Ethan nodded, still acting casual. "Of course, since you don't like it, I'll send them home." He tried to help the dazed group of people to their feet, but they staggered, unwilling to leave. "This place is great," one of them slurred. "There's food, drinks. This is a world we could never dream of." Rose stepped aside and exchanged a glance with her assistant. The assistant quickly slipped out to call the police. At that moment, A noise came from upstairs. Rose frowned. Someone was still up there. Ethan quickly explained, "Rose, wait. The people upstairs are my friends. They're drunk, so I let them rest upstairs." Drunk? But Rose could clearly hear a woman's painful groans coming from above. Her eyes turned cold as she stared at Ethan. "Ethan, don't lie to me. And I don't like my home to be dirty and messy. Tell them to clean up before they leave." After saying this coldly, she turned and began heading upstairs. Ethan called after her, "Rose, my friends are being a bit loud today. I'll make it up to you. Just forgive me this time." "Forgive you for what?" Rose looked at him, but the man standing before her was no longer the Ethan she had once known. He had become selfish, cold, and vengeful. He didn't even spare innocent Robert. She had once thought that when Ethan returned to the country, she would finally settle things with Robert and then marry Ethan. But instead, she had watched Ethan hurt Robert over and over again while she had defended him, unknowingly continuing to hurt Robert in the process. Just then, the sound of police sirens wailed outside. Ethan's face went pale, his eyes darting anxiously between Rose and the door. "Rose, you called the police?" Rose responded coldly, "What, you're just having a little fun with people in my villa, and now you're scared." The more Ethan acted this way, the more suspicious Rose became. What exactly did he think her villa was? Without warning, Ethan grabbed Rose by the neck and hissed, "Rose, this is your fault. You pushed me to this." The assistant shouted in panic, "Ethan, what are you doing? Let go of the CEO now." Rushing forward, the assistant's eyes were wide with fear as he saw Ethan tightening his grip on Rose's neck. He reached for Ethan, trying to pull him away, but Ethan was like a madman now, his strength only intensifying. Rose struggled to breathe, her vision blurring as she gasped for air. She couldn't help but think that maybe it would be easier to just die right there. Robert had already rejected her, and now she didn't want to live either. "Stop!" came the sound of police sirens breaking through the chaos. The officers stormed into the villa, quickly surrounding it, but Ethan still refused to release his grip on Rose. In a desperate move, the assistant grabbed a nearby vase and smashed it over Ethan's head. The force of the hit made Ethan loosen his grip just enough for Rose to finally gasp in a breath of air. It was as if she had been given a second chance at life. Rose could hardly process the danger she had just been in. How had Robert endured when he was locked in the bathroom all night, injured and alone? Fortunately, the assistant had witnessed everything and insisted the police thoroughly search the villa for any more hidden dangers. Sure enough, when they went upstairs, they brought down a young girl, her eyes vacant, her mind shattered, her body bruised and battered. The assistant immediately took off his jacket and draped it over the girl, trying to offer some comfort. They also brought down 3 other young men, all of them acting arrogantly and defiantly. It was clear they had been raised without proper guidance, the kind of kids who wandered the streets without any care for the rules. Ethan was taken away by the police. The next day, news of Ethan's arrest spread like wildfire, causing an uproar across social media. Some people claimed Ethan had been wrongfully accused, while others demanded his release, even showing up outside the police station to yell at the officers. They called for Ethan's freedom, insisting the actor had been framed. Some even contacted the Lou Group, hoping the company would intervene and get Ethan out. Rose looked at the information her assistant had provided. It turned out that Ethan had been living a reckless life overseas years ago. The Lou family had given him money to study abroad, but instead, he squandered it all. When he couldn't keep up the lifestyle anymore, he returned to China and used his family's connections to build a fake persona as a top actor. He had a couple of works under his belt, but they were mostly unknown. She couldn't understand how someone like him could be elevated to the status of Actor of the Year. Every time Rose thought about the things Ethan had done to Robert, she wanted to rip him to shreds. She ordered that Ethan's full criminal record be posted online, exposing him for the fraud he truly was. Almost instantly, the internet erupted in outrage. Although there were still some who doubted the truth, many people began to turn on Ethan, calling him a liar and a cheat. As for the stalker fans who had been involved in harming Robert, most of them were minors. They were taken in for questioning, but released after being given a stern talking to. The assistant was fuming. "Mr. Liu, they've let these kids go. They're already causing trouble at such a young age. What's going to happen when they grow up?" He couldn't help but feel sorry for Robert. Lately, Mr. Liu's temper had been getting worse when Robert was around. He was calmer, but now that things had fallen apart, the assistant was afraid the rest of them might soon feel the consequences. A cold, icy glint flashed in Rose's eyes as she spoke, her voice filled with a chilling determination. "Go and bring them back. I want them to experience firsthand the pain Robert suffered. Make them go through everything Robert went through, one by one, then release them afterward." "Understood." Mr. Liu hesitated before speaking. "Murder is still a crime, you know. Rose scoffed. Killing them would be a mercy. You will make them suffer. Everything Robert went through, then release them. Understood. A few days later, the streets were filled with disabled beggars. Some had their legs broken, others their arms. There were even some with their tongues cut out. No one would ever dare to harm others again after this. After Ethan was locked up in prison, he initially tried to reach out to Rose, begging for her forgiveness. He claimed he was sorry, but Rose didn't even give him a chance to explain. She directly handed over all the evidence of his stalker fans harassing Robert to the police. Ethan was charged with multiple crimes and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Though he was sentenced to 10 years, neither Rose nor the Liu family or even the Su family had the kind of power to shield someone indefinitely. But if they wanted someone dead in prison, that was an entirely different matter. It was almost too easy for them to orchestrate. What Helen hadn't expected was how ruthless Rose would become, even to the point of sacrificing her own blood. Years ago, Rose had been heartbroken over Ethan, devastated to the point where she didn't even want to live. Yet less than a month after Ethan returned to China, Rose had done the unthinkable, cutting him off without hesitation. Everyone had assumed that dealing with Ethan would cause Rose to turn against them, but they were wrong. Rose was just as cold-blooded as they were. She sent Ethan straight to prison. This, in turn, made their internal dealings much more convenient. Of course, I was unaware of all the turmoil behind the scenes. Valentina was constantly at my side, obsessing over every detail of the wedding dress, the invitations, the floral arrangements, my parents' outfits, the decoration of the venue, and the finer details like whether we should use Chinese or Western-style tableware or a combination of both. By night, she never left my side, constantly talking about having children with me. On the night of our wedding, she even stayed in my room, drunk and stubbornly refusing to leave. Even her parents couldn't do anything to stop her. In the end, they had no choice but to let Valentina stay. She would go directly to the wedding the next day, but the old family rules couldn't be broken. We were finally separated by 4 in the morning. As I was leaving, Valentina clung to my clothes, unwilling to let me go. I had to take off my jacket and coax her for a while before finally sending her back to the villa. Once she calmed down and fell asleep, I rubbed my temples and was escorted back by the butler. The wedding went ahead as planned. Valentina was still a little groggy when the bridesmaids woke her up in the morning. She was even a bit irritable at first, but when she saw the bridal suite and the bridesmaids, she remembered that it was her wedding day. Her irritability quickly vanished. One of the bridesmaids teasingly asked Valentina, "The groom's on his way. If you don't get up now, are you planning to have him carry you out of bed?" Another joked, "Why not? Our Valentina is a little fairy after all." Valentina replied, all right, I'm getting up," and finally got out of bed. Today was her wedding day, and after tonight, I would be completely hers. The groom arrived when I appeared downstairs in the villa. The bridesmaids squealed in excitement, shouting, "He's here! He's here!" As my figure appeared at the door, a shower of red envelopes was thrown in the air like confetti. The bridesmaids, momentarily distracted by the scene, quickly scrambled to grab the envelopes off the floor, completely forgetting the planned performance. By the time they realized what had happened, Valentina had already slipped on her shoes and was quietly being carried out by me. The luxury car slowly drove off, leaving the bridesmaids behind, still scrambling to collect the red envelopes. The groomsmen, equally bewildered, hadn't even had time to deal with the bridesmaids' antics before everything was over. They quietly followed us, while the bridesmaids would eventually be escorted to the wedding venue. As the wedding car entered the hotel, I got out and was about to carry my still drowsy bride out of the car when I heard a soft voice call my name, Robert. I hesitated for a moment, holding Valentina in my arms. Valentina sleepily said, "I'm awake, husband." Her voice, once sluggish, was now full of energy, as if to say, "The wedding is today. Don't even think about stealing my man." I smiled indulgently and playfully tapped her nose. She smiled back and said, "Husband, hug me." Valentina snuggled closer into my arms. I grinned and said, "Of course." Gently, I lifted her out of the car and turned my gaze to Rose. "Rose, I'm so glad you could attend the wedding today." I spoke calmly, my eyes briefly meeting hers before moving back to Valentina, who was nestled in my arms. Helen, standing nearby, nervously glanced at Rose. She had promised Rose that she would only watch me get married, but if Rose caused any trouble, she would surely be blamed. Before Helen could step forward, Rebecca grabbed her wrist to stop her. I made no move to acknowledge Rose. Rose spoke, "Robert, this is my wedding gift to you. I hope you like it." Her eyes were filled with nothing but Robert, wishing she could have been the one in the wedding dress, cherished in the same way. But she was wrong, so terribly wrong. She shouldn't have treated Robert as a substitute for Ethan. She had thought that what she couldn't have was the best, while the one who had always been there for her had been ignored. Now, feeling defeated, Rose took out some company shares and handed them to Robert as a form of compensation. I replied, "Thank you, Rose. I'm already so happy you could be here today. As for the gift, it's too much. I really can't accept this." I glanced at the shares transfer document in Rose's hand. It was too extravagant for a wedding gift. Valentina added, "Sister, I know this is your way of making up for the years of regret, but Robert is now my husband, and we'll face everything together. You don't need to worry about him anymore." Valentina reached out to tap me, signaling she wanted to be put down. Once on her feet, she handed the shares back to Rose. Her voice was soft but firm, her cheeks puffed slightly, clearly showing her displeasure at the woman who had repeatedly interrupted her happiness. Helen quickly stepped forward and pulled Rose aside. "All right, let's go inside. We don't want to miss the good timing." Rose, almost stumbling, was led away. She stood there, a look of confusion on her face, watching as we were surrounded by well-wishers and ushered into the hotel. That position by the groom's side should have been hers, but she had ruined it. The ceremony began. Rose stood quietly in the corner, watching the bride walk arm in arm with her father as the wedding march filled the air. The bride was delivered into the groom's arms. The host began to warm up the atmosphere. The host asked, "Do you, the couple, promise to face all challenges together, to raise children, care for your parents, and grow old together? Do you both agree?" "We do." I looked into Valentina's eyes. Her gaze was completely filled with me, and together we spoke the words, "We do." Now, the exchange of rings. I took the ring and suddenly knelt before her. Robert, thank you for marrying me. I also thank you for choosing me." We carefully slid the rings onto each other's fingers. The host smiled and said, "Now the groom may kiss the bride." Before the words were fully out, Valentina had already thrown herself into my arms, and we kissed. The guests applauded, showering us with blessings. Rose had no idea how she ended up outside the hotel. She was in a daze and eventually collapsed by the roadside. Helen and Rebecca, coming out, felt some guilt and decided to take Rose to the hospital. Meanwhile, Valentina and I were already on our honeymoon, heading abroad to celebrate.